All right, welcome everybody. It's Brian Walsh here, your host for the evening. Of course, going to be talking a little bit from me, but mostly from Dr. John Demartini as a whole. But just to make sure you guys can hear us loud and clear, just let us know in the questions box or in the chat box if you can hear us loud and clear. And as you're already doing, lots of the regulars telling us where you're joining us from on this wonderful morning, afternoon, evening, depending where you are in the world. And you guys can all actually see the chat box. So you can see people coming here from Las Vegas and London and Toronto and South Africa and Ireland and United States and Canada again and all over the place. So it's great to have the rooms filling up at a rapid rate. It's great to have everyone with us today. And the diversity of working with Dr. Demartini and his students all over the world and all the people that are so interested in it. It's such a pleasure to see such a large group of people. We've got like every corner of the world here. People must be up in the middle of the night or in the early hours of the morning. So it's great to have you guys with us. So let me just set a little bit of context as the room sort of fills up. Firstly, like I said, my name is Brian Walsh from The Real Entrepreneur. That's not overly relevant because I'm just the host who's really just talking to Dr. Demartini about what he wants to share with us today. The topic today, of course, is from stress to success. And I think it's a really exciting topic because this time of year, a lot of people are experiencing the wonderful feelings of stress, or as we would call it, distress, which is a challenging equation to work with as a whole going forward. But that's the topic we're going to be talking about. And we also just want to say right up front, the webinar is going to be around 60 to 90 minutes maximum. We're also going to be just mentioning or talking about John's signature program, the Breakthrough Experience, which is a 2-year program. So at the end of the session, we'll talk more about that and where it's available around the world and give you guys some opportunities to particularly participate with that. Make sure you got a pen and paper. I think a lot of people sometimes come into these webinars and just sort of listen to them and think, well, I can just watch the recording. But there's so many incredible snippets of wisdom that I know Dr. Demartini is going to share with you. And you want to make sure you got a pen and paper so you can take down some notes, because this is going to be a very practical and real topic that a lot of us are dealing with, which is this whole context of stress as a whole as we go forward. All right. So one other thing as well before we get going is when Dr. Demartini actually starts, we're going to turn the comments off. Now, that doesn't mean we can't see the comments, so you can still comment to us. It just stops everyone else from seeing this running, span of comments that goes down the right-hand side or wherever it is on your screen. And that's distracting. We want you to focus on Dr. Demartini and not be listening or typing to each other and distracting yourself from the actual content that we're supposed to be talking about as a whole. So I know a lot of you obviously know Dr. Demartini, but some of you don't. I've known Dr. Demartini now for I think just 12 years. It's been an incredible journey as a whole. In my opinion, I work with some of the best speakers, the best known speakers in the world. And without a question, in my opinion, Dr. Demartini is the #1 human behavioral specialist in the world. So when it really comes to understanding how we tick and what makes us make decisions and what makes us actually act and what makes us not act and what makes us get stressed and what makes us not get stressed and all these kind of elements about how we live our life in terms of an inspired, quality-based life. There's no one in par with Dr. Demartini when it comes to understanding that element of human science and human behavior as well. So he is truly, truly a genius in that space. From my own experience, it's been absolutely amazing. But I mean, he's influenced the lives of literally hundreds and hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people throughout the world with all his books and all his presentations and all the work that he's been doing for quite a while now. So I'm very, very excited to be chatting to him again. So I think without further ado, let's start talking to Dr. Demartini. So, John, if you can put a video on.
Yes, thank you.
Then see you. There we go. We got you on the full screen. So, welcome. Where are you joining us from today?
I'm in Toronto. I'm at overlooking Lake Ontario. If I open that window, that's Lake Ontario.
Okay, excellent. So in Canada. So great to have you with us. And as always, making time out for wherever you are in the world to talk to the masses of people that want to share with you today. It's great to do that. But let's dive straight in. I think this is a topic I know you're excited about. It's a topic I'm excited to hear about. Let's just talk about what stress is and how it actually affects us and where it comes from, because people just take it for granted. They feel this thing or this emotion called stress, but not really understanding where it actually evolves from.
All right. First of all, I'm going to differentiate two forms of stress because the stress is a kind of a blanket term. There's what they call eustress, and there's distress. Eustress is actually wellness promoting, and distress is illness promoting. So I'm going to differentiate that. But distress is the inability to adapt to an ever-changing environment. The inability to adapt to an ever-changing environment. And what happens is we get attached to things. We can get infatuated with things and fear its loss. That's stressful. We can actually get detached from something and fear its gain. And that's just distressful. So in other words, we have two forms of stress. Biologically, in our brain, we register really just two forms or two reasons for distress. And that is the fear of loss of that which we infatuate with or seek, which is prey, which is food. We fear starvation, in other words. And we have the fear of gain of predator or the things we resent, which is somebody going to eat us. So the fear of starvation and fear of being eaten boil down in the brain to the two most basic primitive forms of stress there are. All the other derivatives of that are things that we get infatuated with or resentful to, that we fear is going to be gone or we fear is going to come upon us. And that those phobias, those stresses, are all the two components that make up distress. A divided form of stress. And eustress is a different ball of wax. That's when you're actually pursuing something that is meaningful to you, that you actually enjoy, that's challenging, that you conquer and you pursue. I use the analogy of the young boy who loves his video games. When he conquers a video game and finishes a video game and knows how to beat it every time he gets on there, he immediately wants to go on to a next, more challenging video game. And so he's pursuing challenges that inspire him. And instead of trying to avoid a challenge, he's actually pursuing it. And this leads to eustress. Innovation, creativity, genius is born by pursuing challenges that inspire us. But where the child's not doing something that's inspiring, doing its homework, maybe cleaning up its room, doing chores, it wants to avoid that and not search for that, then having to do it is now distress. So when you're doing something that's challenging, that's meaningful, it's eustress and it's wellness promoting. When you're having to do something that is challenging that you don't want to do, that's distress. And that boils down to, again, the perception of loss of that which we seek or the perception of gain of that which we are trying to avoid. Those are the two basic forms of distress. But both of those, the more rigid those emotional charges are of seeking or avoiding, the more infatuated or resentful we are, the higher the probability of distress and the more it affects us physiologically and creates symptoms.
And I think it's amazing the way you sort of explain that, and sometimes we don't think of it. It's almost like there's good stress and there's bad stress, right? But values, I mean, your latest book, The Values Factor, is like, to me, one of the greatest things ever written, and your understanding of the hierarchy of values. I mean, this has got a relation to both eustress and distress as a whole?
Absolutely. First of all, it was Hans Selye and a gentleman who I had dinner with, Albert Crumb, who is the one that coined the term good stress and bad stress, or eustress and distress. And so I want to give them credit because I had the opportunity to meet with Albert Crumb. He's friends of Hans Selye, and these are the guys that actually figured out the brain endocrine physiological responses of these perceptual induced stress responses or distress responses. So they deserve to be acknowledged. Now, the way they relate to values is quite simplistic. Every human being has a set of priorities, things that are highest to lowest in your priority list or value list. And I'm using them synonymously. Something you have a high value on is something that's high in priority. Something that's low in value has low priority. Or things that are most important to least important in your life. So each person has a hierarchy of values, a set of priorities that they live their life by. Whenever they're doing actions that are aligned and congruent with highest value, the thing that's most inspiring and meaningful, that there's intrinsic value, that they love doing, they are pursuing it, and they're willing to embrace both pain and pleasure, support and challenge, ease and difficulty, the positives and negatives equally in the pursuit of it. This is when they pursue challenges that inspire them. That leads to eustress. So if you're living congruently with your highest value, you embrace the challenges and generate a wellness promoting eustress. And this is the person who loves exercising, but actually in the exercise, they're having to use muscles and push themselves and tear down muscular systems, etc. That's eustress. If somebody is forced to do that exercise they don't want to do, it now becomes distress. So something that's low on your values, very low on your values, that you feel trapped having to do, that's distress. And distress is, again, illness promoting. It actually runs down the immune system, increases inflammatory responses, and creates symptomatology in your body as a feedback to let you know that either change what you're doing and go do what you love and delegate those things, or change your perception of those. You see, we have control over our perceptions, decisions, and actions in life. So we can change our perceptions of things that are happening to us. And if we can see how they're helping us fulfill our highest values, we can turn a distress into a eustress. But if we can't see how what we're doing is fulfilling our highest values, it becomes distressful, particularly when we have to do it. And our language shows it. I'd love to do it versus I have to do it. One is inspiring and one is despairing. But at the same time, if a person is living by lower values, they go into a more primitive part of the brain, a more inner part of the brain called the amygdala. And that part of the brain is involved in impulses and instincts to seek and to avoid prey and predator, pleasure and pain. And when we do, we have a tendency to want to get an immediate gratifying pleasure and avoid all stresses, all challenges. And that's when the things that come with it, because nature has both sides, that becomes distressful. So when you live by your highest values, you end up creating eustress. When you live by your lower values, you end up with distress. And the only way you can live by your lower values for any period of time is to subordinate to somebody else that you put on a pedestal, inject their values into your life, and attempt to be somebody you're not. And you're designed to create distress as a feedback to you to let you know you're not being authentic and you're not living integrally with what you value, your highest value. That's why it's so important, and why our own state of being, our identity, revolves around our highest values, and how important it is to be authentic and integral to that by living congruently with our highest values. If we do, we have eustress, we build our body, we live longer, our telomeres extend on our genes, and we have longer time and space horizons to live in, and we have a tendency to have foresighted into what we want to create in life and masters of destiny. And if we don't, we live by our lower values, we're in an area that doesn't have visual responses, and those without a vision perish, and we end up having stress, distress, and we end up having the aging process and immediate gratification. Freud called the former the ego when you live congruently, and the other he called the id. And if you're an id, it means you got a tiny psyche. Idiot means tiny psyche, shrunken psyche.
So I've never heard that before, so that's quite interesting. But now, I mean, here's the thing. I mean, we talk about the pursuit of living as congruently as possible with our values, which is obviously, once we understand your teaching around that, what we try and do. But in the reality of life, like, you know, in the chaos of life, so to speak, I mean, there are many things that we do that are not directly aligned with our values. How do we do them in such a way that doesn't lead to distress?
Well, if for some reason you have not orchestrated and created a life where you've delegated lower priority things, and you are occasionally or consistently having to do things that you feel trapped by, you're going to live distressfully because you haven't mastered the art of pursuing what you would really love to do, what's highest on your value, in a way that actually serves other individuals, that produces an income to be able to afford the delegation of lower priority things. See, anytime you're doing high priority actions that are highest on your values, you grow in self-worth. And your willingness to receive opportunities and to value you and the world valuing you goes up. If you're living by lower values, the lower the values, the lower your self-worth. And you devalue yourself, and so does the world. The world's going to reflect that. So if you haven't taken the time to either do one of two things, either prioritize what you're doing and delegate lower priority things by surrounding yourself with people who have a high value on doing those things that you have a low value on. That way they can do something that's inspiring and you don't have to micromanage them and you can get on with doing what's more inspiring to you. That's the smartest approach. That eventually liberates you from low priority things that devalue you and create distress. The other is to temporarily, until you can find the person to delegate, temporarily link. And this is what I do in the Breakthrough Experience program. And I've shared that, and you've been there, Brian. In the
Yep.
breakthrough experience, I show people how to take something that they are temporarily, transiently having to do in their mind and asking how specifically is doing this temporarily until I can find somebody to delegate it to. How is it helping me fulfill what I'm my highest value? If you can see how what you're doing is helping you fulfill your highest value, it's no longer distressful, it becomes eustressful. And you automatically change the cytokines and inflammatory and the immune response. So you have two ways of doing with it. Either go and do what you love through delegating and do what's highest on your priority and live an inspired life intrinsically, authentically, or temporarily link what you're doing to what you love. And that is by changing your perception of it temporarily until you can find somebody to delegate to. But ultimately, if you're not delegating lower priority things and you're trapped by low priority things, you're going to devalue yourself, and so is the world. And the reason why you're devaluing, and the reason why the world is doing that, is to give you feedback to let you know you're not being authentic. Now, I'm a firm believer that everything that's going on in our life, in our physiology, psychology, sociology, and even theology, is attempting to help us be authentic and helping us live congruently and fluently, because we're in the flow that way. And so these distress is not necessarily a terrible thing if you understand its context. It's actually giving you feedback to let you know that the way you're prioritizing and managing your life is not yet masterful. And the moment you begin to be masterful at it, by going and pursuing something you love doing that makes the income to pay people to delegate things to, you've liberated yourself. You know, I love researching, writing, and traveling and teaching. The rest of my stuff is delegated. I delegate all the, I don't cook, I don't drive, I don't do anything domestic. I have a very simplified system. Now, that didn't happen overnight. That happened by making a list of everything I did in a day, prioritizing that relative to how much it produced per hour and how much meaning it had, and then how much it cost to delegate that out and how much time was spent. I actually went through there, prioritized it, and realized slowly but surely I'm going to keep delegating layer by layer by layer all the lower priority things until I'm doing what I'm inspired to do each day. That didn't happen overnight. It took a few years to do, but in the process of doing it, if you don't ever take the time to do that, you're trapped. Alec McKinsey, in his book, The Time Trap, talked about how many people are trapped in their life and living quiet lives of desperation, as Thoreau said, because they haven't mastered the ability to delegate. Do not expect an inspired life without delegation. It's an essential component because you can't do everything and expect to be inspired when you're having to do something that's not inspiring.
I think another aspect that that I've sort of felt recently, and I know we've spoken a lot about it because as you know, I train entrepreneurs and the comprehensive amount of things that they have to do, is this concept of overwhelm. Like recently, I had a project which I'm inspired to do because it serves my greatest value. But when I started to go through all the many things I had to learn and all the many things I had to sort of master, and it's maybe because I always put time frames, I want to do it really fast. But then suddenly you feel the sense of overwhelm. Overwhelm just leads to distress as well, right? Because sometimes it's debilitating for people where they just don't act, they completely procrastinate and stop doing things.
Well, anytime you have overwhelm, there's a number of reasons for it. I have a thing that I mention and I talk about in the breakthrough experience. It's the term priority comes from a priori, which is the number one, highest priority. Priorities is a plural version of that came along later, and it wasn't the original term because the priority was the number one thing. I think it was Gary Keller wrote the book, The One Thing, and finding out the one thing that you are greatest at and getting to that is very crucial. So if you're doing more things instead of hiring specialists around you that are greater in knowledge than you, you're automatically going to multitask, distract yourself, and lower the overall productivity. Ricardo's law of economics shows that if you surround yourself with people who have a high priority and are very skilled and very powerful and are the greatest at what they do in doing the things that you need to delegate so you can get on to doing what you are the number one thing in, overall, economically, everyone wins. And this is Ricardo's advantage, competitive advantage. So you really can't compete in the marketplace if you're trying to subordinate to other people and trying to do things that aren't really perfectly designed to do. Now, you may do that temporarily to learn something, but if you can surround yourself and prioritize the thing you're doing to what that produces the most income and prioritize that and stick to those things that produce the most and delegate the rest, you come out ahead because you're freed of having to try to learn all the learning curves and you're freed of having to do all the things that aren't as inspiring. But temporarily, people believe that because they're not doing something that's meaningful and producing an income, they're trapping themselves. Delegation never costs if it's done properly. It costs when you're delegated to people that are not inspired to do it, that you got to micromanage, it's got to push uphill and distract yourself from the highest priority things that can produce the money to actually pay for the delegation. But if you're sticking to the things that are most meaningful, your stress levels go down. Now, I have a system which I discuss, which is called the distraction resolution process, where if you feel distracted and overwhelmed, you make a list of everything that's on your mind. You then ask, do I need to delegate that to somebody else or me doing it? Then you need to set reasonable time frames on it. Then you need to chunk it down into smaller bites, because many people set unrealistic time frames on things when they're manic, and then they end up being depressed because they're overwhelmed by it. Instead of setting realistic time frames and real objectives and chunk down small bites and real time frames. So if you chunk it down to small bites, you delegate as much as possible, you stick to the things you do the most, which produces the income to pay for it, you liberate yourself from the feelings of overwhelm.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I mean, you mentioned it earlier because there's that statement like stress kills. There's a direct relation to distress and your health, and for that matter, you stress as well, and your actual health and wellness as a whole.
Well, let's just use an example. Let's say you have somebody that you're infatuated with, very, very infatuated with. You're a young guy, young buck, and you see a beautiful a gazelle out there, and it's just a beautiful, beautiful person. You're highly infatuated with them, and you can see all the upsides, but you can't see the downsides, and you're blinded. And you have a subjective bias and a confirmation bias on all the positives and a disconfirmation bias on all the negatives. You're conscious of the upsides and unconscious of the downsides. Because of that extreme infatuation, you have an anxiety about losing it because you're now infatuated, and you create an added stress because you polarize your perceptions. And so subjective biases that occur in the amygdala tend to polarize us in our perceptions, and we get rigidly attracted to something that we infatuate with, which increases our potential stress or fear of loss of it. On the other hand, we can also get so resentful to somebody that they occupy space and time in our mind, and we perceive all the negatives. We don't see the upsides. We're conscious of the negatives. We're unconscious of the positives. We have a confirmation bias on the negatives, a disconfirmation bias on the positives. We're polarized. We think they're all negative. We're very resentful. We're playing the victim of it. Now we have the fear of them coming into our life. So our stress levels are directly proportionate to how polarized and subjectively biased our interpretations of our reality are. So we have the capacity with our intuition to ask questions that bring our mind back into balance. In the breakthrough experience, I teach people those questions. That's one of the just small benefit of the breakthrough experience, is to teach you how to take any form of stress that you might be facing, show you exactly what you're doing to generate it. Never about the things out there. People always talk about, well, this is a stressful situation. There is no stressful situation. There is no stress out there. Stress is created by perception. So I can take a perception of somebody, change the perception, and the same thing that was distressful now becomes eustressful, now becomes something you're grateful for. So I do that in the breakthrough every weekend, but I love teaching people how to do that so they've got it for the rest of their life. So knowing how to ask questions that bring your mind back into balance, where you're objective instead of subjectively biased, and you have a more even-minded state, which is what happens if you live by your highest values. That makes you more objective and reasonable and intuitive, and you equilibrate the mind, you liberate yourself from the stress levels automatically, and you automatically are now grateful, get on with what you're doing. You know, they've shown that people that can work, that if they're doing something they really love to do, they can work 18 hours a day without even having any signs of illness or breakdown. But if they're doing something they feel they have to do, they're uninspired by, even working 7 to 8 hours a day can be killing them. So I work, Brian, I'm sure you put in the hours too, but I certainly put in a lot of hours in a typical week. And some people go, that's insane, the number of hours I put in. But in the process of doing it, if I'm doing something I love to do, it doesn't seem like anything other than what I love doing. And you're doing something you love. I remember having dinner with Bill Pollack, who owns Drake Corporation, Drake International. And he works 16, 18 hours a day many times, sometimes 7 days a week. He loves it. He doesn't age. He's almost 90 years old, and he doesn't look, but he's 60s. And that's because he's doing something he loves and he's prioritizing his life and he's delegating the heck out of the things that he's not perfectly designed to do.
I mean, it's quite profound when you think about it. It's like the stress is often directly related to how incongruent you are or how much you're not living a life that's actually inspired. Because when we look at it from that context, obviously the more we are inspired. So most of my time that I'm doing things, I have to remind myself to go and sleep, or I have to remind myself to take a break or to eat something.
Exactly.
Or, my body sort of doesn't always signal it properly, and I don't have any issue being motivated or inspired to do that. And then you don't actually feel stressed, even though you're working exceptionally hard and not sleeping enough and not even looking after yourself. You literally you feel inspired and you don't feel that essence of stress. But the minute you're doing something that you don't want to do, even if it's a small thing, it blows up into this big sort of distress of having to do it, and you procrastinate, and then it gets worse, and you procrastinate, and it gets worse, and it just becomes this whole negative equation.
You get into a vicious cycle. Exactly. That's why it's so important to prioritize your life. If you don't fill your day with high priority actions that inspire you, your day fills up with low priority distractions that don't. And you're designed. I tell people that the stresses in your life are your friends, not your enemies. In this respect, they're guiding you back to an authentic, inspired, prioritized, congruent life once you interpret them properly. So that's why I tell people to get to the breakthrough experience, because they're so used to making the outside world be the cause of their effect, instead of realizing that they're the cause of their own effect. And that actually you can transcend that and get to a causal stage where there's nothing there to even cause and effect. And you reach that point, you realize, hey, no matter what happens to me, it's on the way, not in the way. And it's stressful, not distressful. It's a perceptual game. And I have people all the time. I had this young boy that came to me and he says, well, Mr. Demartini, I had problems. I was an orphan and I had this and I had this health problem and this and that. He started running his story and his racket, his psychological racket. You go to a therapist. You can tell when people have been to some therapist because they've been running stories and they know how to say the story properly. And I said, well, great. So you didn't have parents, you're an orphan and everything else. And I said, let's just take a look here a second. I pulled out my computer and I found a list that's got a list of 700 celebrities on it that were orphans. I said, well, you're in the category of Sir Isaac Newton, Tycho Brahe, Wayne Dyer, Steve Jobs. And I made a list, showed him the list of all the people that start out just like him. And he goes, really? And I said, yeah, that means you have that an advantage. And all of a sudden he goes, oh. I said, yeah, because you're thinking laterally. You're not being structured and boxed into a form, and you had different forms of parents, and you had more resiliency, and you had to learn how to adapt. And all of a sudden he goes, oh, I'm special. And I said, yeah, now you've taken the same event and turned it into something you're grateful for. So it's not what happens to you. That's why William James, the father of modern psychology, said that the greatest discovery of his generation, that human beings can alter their lives by altering their perceptions and attitudes of mind. If you see things on the way, the breakthrough experience is basically teaching people a set of questions to make you aware of what you're unconscious of, so you can be fully conscious and transform distress into eustress. And that's what I love doing. I love watching people come there with something they think is a terrible event. I had a lovely lady in Ireland this last week. She thought she had this terrible event dealing with her family members. At the end, she goes, wow, there's nothing there except something to be thankful for. So all she wanted to do is contact him and say thank you. And I said, well, it's all about your perception. You've been running a story about victim of history instead of mastery of destiny. And now you're a master of destiny because she asked the right questions. That's the difference between distress and eustress, the different questions we ask and how we interpret our reality. Because it's never the outside world that's determining it, it's how we interpret it. We have control over perceptions, decisions, and actions.
I think sometimes just that awareness is profound. When you actually realize, like a little thing recently, I caught myself, getting frustrated with certain things. And I found that I suddenly got into this kind of negative space where lots of things started to frustrate me. And then I suddenly sort of, said to myself, Brian, stop. What are you doing? Like you actually just almost feed in this kind of beast, in terms of silly little things that are almost trivial, that you're allowing to frustrate yourself and you're starting to rant and rave about things instead of take control. Because it's perception. A lot of people aren't actually even aware of what's going on in their mind that's leading them into these negative spaces.
Yeah, Brian, you just said a very important word, feeding the beast.
Yeah.
Now, let me elaborate on that. The animals, the difference between a human being and the animal is very simple. We have the capacity to find meaning, which is the mean between the polarities, with our intuition and our objective reason. Those are the three things that distinguish us from the emotional animals. And animals want to avoid predator being eaten and want to seek prey, eating. So feeding the beast is the pursuit of the animal nature impulsively to try to get food and try to avoid the predator. So that as you go through there and you don't see things on the way, you're literally feeding your beast inside, and your animal nature is taken over instead of your old angelic nature. Your wiser angelic nature, the enlightened person, angel means messenger of light, the enlightened person that has a message to the world and has a vision for the world and has a mission for the world is the real you. And so feeding the beast is better to starve the beast and feed the angel. Little angel food there.
And tell me, just back on the sort of the physical body and how it reacts to this. I mean, eustress. So we talk about distress, and we kind of all know distress makes you unhealthy and gives you all types of ailments and challenges. Does eustress do the opposite? I mean, if you are living in that space of eustress, do you find that it actually benefits the body and makes it healthier?
Well, let me give an example here. Every cell in the body, regardless of the tissue, organ, or system that it's derived from, has receptor sites on it. Little glycoprotein, sugar protein chained molecules that, like antennas that are sitting on the edge of the cell wall. These things are very specific. The different moieties and different specific sugars and protein amino acids that are lining this up make a three-dimensional conformational shape that's specific to a particular transmitter, modulator, regulator, or hormone, or some paracrine or endocrine or autocrine gland secretion. And so what happens is this molecule that is being released, it goes into the bloodstream or the lymphatic system or extracellular fluid or the venous system or whatever, and finds itself at a cell wall. And this molecule is being turned on and turned off by our perceptions. So let's say, because we have a set of values, if we see things that support our values, we activate the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the rest and digest side. If we see something that challenges our values, highly challenging, we perceive the sympathetic side, which is the fight or flight side. Fight or flight side releases a chemical compound, norepinephrine, epinephrine, and the other one, the one that's for the rest and digest, releases acetylcholine. These are transmitters circulate to the fluid systems, go into a cell, attach to a cell receptor, cause a change in the cell receptor three-dimensionally, which opens a little gate with the help of calmodulin and another second messenger called cyclic AMP or GMP. That causes a cascading of a series of enzymes. Those enzymes then go all the way down to the nucleus. They pass through a nuclear pore. They go into the little proteins or the actual genes themselves and causes a transcription by acetylating it if it's a parasympathetic side or methylating it if it's a sympathetic side. And they cause a transcription in a protein manufacturing that's specific to the perception of the stress, that's then released into and is packaged and then released to cause changes in the cell or around the cell into the tissues. And so we literally can trace our perceptions down to the cellular level, down to the tissue, and how it actually causes changes in proteins, changes in enzyme functions, changes in physiology, and causes too much or too little of some expression, which we've labeled illness. And I wrote a 1,000-page textbook on the different conditions psychologically that's causing these changes physiologically. And it's really quite impressive. It's, impressive in the sense that it's mind-blowing about what your body is trying to reveal to you. It is constantly trying to neutralize it. If you're sympathetically activated and you get the methylation, you can actually create a mechanism that actually reduces the oxidation that goes on from stress. And on the other side, if you're basically getting the parasympathetic, you create the acetylation, which oxidizes, which is balancing out the reduction. So the brain is set up and the body's set up and endocrine system is set up to try to bring everything back into balance, because when you're in balance, you have physiological homeostasis or homeostasis, as they call it. And this is a necessary state to have wellness. That also changes the chemistries in the brain and brings them into balance. And the brain is doing everything it can to bring that. The endocrine system has feedbacks to try to do that. The tissues have feedback systems. At all scales, there's literally feedback loops that are trying to get us back in equilibrium. But as long as we have an imbalanced perspective stored in the subconscious mind, we keep perturbing it and keep disturbing that balance. And we keep creating symptoms to let us know that we're holding on to an emotional lie about the magnificent balanced universe. And when we do, we create symptoms and we have distress. But once we balance it by living by our highest values, and having more objective views and more even equanimity states of mind, we bring about wellness and healing. That's why in the breakthrough experience, every weekend, just every weekend, as people do the Demartini method and they go through there and they use their intuitive questioning to balance out all the perceptions that they're bogged down in, that they're distressed about, and they bring it back into eustress and they see the hidden order in their chaos and they go, thank you. All of a sudden they report changes in physiology, changes in health issues. I mean, we've even seen people with MS and people with different forms of cancers shift their physiology and all of a sudden transform it. And now all of a sudden this so-called disease that was there is just dissipates away. So I've seen people literally transform their physiology by changing their perceptions and attitudes of mind, just like William James taught.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, it's kind of unbelievable when you go into the depth of that ripple effect. And, you know, it all comes back down to that, you know, living an inspired life versus living a life that's uninspired. And it's like, I think it's kind of crazy in a way, because it's such a complex process that happens that leads to all types of ailments, attractions, and distractions, and all types of things in our lives. That is really just this concept of, are you being authentic or are you not being authentic? I mean, it's almost literally boils down to that. And I think breakthrough, or, you know, when I came the first time, it was very much around answering the question, who am I authentically? Who should I be? How should I be authentic to myself? Because that's the kind of starting point of the ripple effect of all these challenges.
Well, the key is, you know, I say the magnificence of who you are is far greater than any fantasies you'll impose on yourself. And let me define a fantasy for a second. We've all had moments where we've maybe walked in a mall and we saw somebody or met somebody that we thought was more intelligent than us, or maybe they were more successful in business than us that we thought. And this is all perception. It may not be true, but it looks that way at least. Or they may have more wealth than us, or they may have more stable relationship, or they may have more influence socially, or maybe possibly they're better looking, healthier looking, or maybe they're more disciplined in their fitness, or maybe they're more spiritually aware. But whatever our perception, the second we compare ourselves to them and imagine them having something we don't, and we're too humble to admit what we see in them is inside us, and we put them on a pedestal. Once we value them more than ourselves, we tend to inject their values into our life. And it's a survival mechanism. It's built into our nature. It's a herd instinct. When we're anxious and we're minimizing ourselves, it's our way of feeling like we can survive. And we inject those values and we cloud the clarity of our own hierarchy of values. And we start to confuse ourselves what's important. And we start to set goals that are confused instead of clear. And then what's happened is they become fantasies, because anytime we expect to live in other people's values instead of our own, we automatically have a phobia, an anxiety about it, because we have a feedback inside us to let us know that ain't us. That's not who we are. And so we're designed, when we set up a fantasy of living in other people's values instead of living in our own highest value, we automatically have phobias and self-depreciations coming in to feedback that. And we have a higher probability of distress because we're inauthentic. That's why we're not here to compare ourselves to others. We're here to compare our own daily actions to our own highest values. We're not here to live in the shadows, people. We're here to stand on the shoulders of giants by realizing what we see in them is already inside us and not minimizing ourselves to them, but just seeing as a reflection with equanimity and equity. When we do, we go forward and honor our own creation, our own genius, our own power, and we have eustress, not distress.
Yeah, I think that's something that's very real as well, because I think we sometimes do, when we're trying to achieve something, we often look for like a mentor, somebody who's done it before us. And then we look at what they've done in 10 years and we kind of think as if we've got to do that in 2 months, you know, and it's like comparing yourself to yourself and measuring yourself against your own progress is a lot less distressful than, you know, and a lot more stressful in that basis. So, I mean, it's sometimes just the focus of what we're thinking or comparing ourselves to that makes us feel things.
You know, I did an exercise with my son. I have an incredible, loving son that's 28, almost 28 anyway. And I had him do an exercise in my office. He was blessed to come in there and help me. I was blessed in it. And he basically went there and archived hundreds and hundreds of audio and video programs that I delivered over the last 40-some years. And he put those in archive, those so we have records of them, because they were just, you know, oxidizing and disappearing. And I want him to do it for 2 reasons. One, because I wanted those archived. And 2, I want him to see me at his age. Because it's one thing to compare yourself to somebody who's 30-something years older, but it's another thing to compare yourself to where I was at exactly his age. And he had a few chuckles. He goes, "Dad, you were really bad." You really had a real start. You can barely speak very clearly. I said, I know, but if you just keep doing something and just keep doing it, you eventually learn and polish and practice, and you get more graced at it. But I did that for two reasons. So he wouldn't compare himself to somebody who's advanced, but he compared himself to somebody at the same age. And then as a result of that, he looked and more honored himself. Does that make sense? He basically, instead of going, oh my God, I that's so far ahead of me, I can't do that, and self-defeat, he really saw, man, I'm already smarter than that guy. And that catalyzed him further. But I would say you got to, instead of comparing, it's wiser to actually just focus on what it is you know is priority and just focus on that. They found out that people in sports, when they're comparing themselves to other players, they don't do as well as if they focus on the procedures that they've proven that works for themselves.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. There's another factor that I think becomes very relevant, and I know you talk about a lot, because we're talking about being true to our values and we're talking about trying to be congruent as an individual. But we need vision, right? And I mean, to a large degree, if we lack vision, that's also going to feed the distress, because we're not going to, like, the pieces aren't going to fit together in terms of what we're doing and why we're doing it.
Well, it's interesting. Whenever we are setting a goal that is aligned and congruent with what we value most, the most intrinsic value, what I call the telos, which our brain is designed to seek and fulfill, the second we do, the blood glucose and oxygen literally moves from the hindbrain into the forebrain. It literally changes its flow and goes up into the brain. You can see this on functional MRIs because it's measuring blood flow. And you'll see that the brain automatically gets now in the forebrain, in the medial prefrontal cortex, which is the telencephalon, which is the end of the brain, the newest part of the brain, and partly into the parietal and temporal regions a little bit. That area lights up automatically under functional MRIs when you're doing something congruent. And that area also sends a reflex, you might say, back into the visual cortex, not the primary, but the fifth and sixth layer of the visual cortex, which is consciously aware of a vision. And so when you're living congruently with your highest values, you get an inspiring, lucid vision about what you want to do in the future. And then you can strategically plan and anticipate what could go haywire along the way and prepare in advance and mitigate the risk. You have a yearning in the motor cortex to take action. And you have another part that's activating and suppressing with a glutamate and GABA receptors. It's literally stopping the amygdala from firing into distractions of infatuation, resentment. And so when you're living by your highest values, the most advanced part of the brain takes command and become master of your destiny, and you have a lucid vision. That's why they say those with a vision tend to flourish and those without a vision perish. But when you're attempting to live in the lower values by trying to be somebody you're not, you automatically go into that primitive part of the brain, or the inner brain, which is the amygdala area, and the nucleus accumbens and the ventral striatum is seeking and avoiding pleasure and pain. You're distracted. You have no vision. And you're basically learning in a lower level heuristic, which is basically a trial and error learning process. And you're learning like an animal, and it's not as effective. So that's why setting a goal that is congruent with your highest value is so empowering. Everything that I've studied on the brain, everything I've studied in psychology and in axiology of values, all point to that one thing. Fill your day with high priority actions that inspire you, and your life changes. That's why in the breakthrough experience, the focus is that. I want people to master their lives. I want them to be able to know how to empower themselves intellectually and wake up their genius, to empower themselves in business so they can have a global business, which is essential today, to help them go and empower themselves economically because they deserve it, and then to have it working for them instead of them working for money, to empower themselves in relationship, by communicating respectfully with equity other people's values, in their values, to be the leader that they're designed to be in that area that they love doing, that they can't wait to get up in the morning and do, to have more physiology and vitality from it and be inspired by their life. That's what's possible. That's why I love doing that. I did the breakthrough experience this weekend. It'll be 1,040th time. And I love doing it because getting that message out and having people get that is absolutely inspiring to me. I guess that's why people go, you've done it 1,040 times. I said, when I spoke last night, they said, 1,040 times you're neurotic. I said, no, I'm blessed.
Yeah, well, it's just you being true to exactly what you love doing and what's your highest values. But I think, I mean, let's sort of bring it back down to a place where, because I think, we're going into a space of getting a much deeper understanding of how this whole ripple effect works. But what should somebody do? If somebody's listening right now, you've got to come to the breakthrough experience if that's possible. We're going to tell you about that a little bit later and what opportunities around the world there are to do that, because you're obviously going to learn a lot of techniques that are directly practical to actually resolve this challenge. But what are the kind of practical things one can do straight away to prevent, to diminish distress and move more towards eustress?
Well, I said there's two primary things you can do. You can either go and do what you love through delegating or love what you do through linking. So those are the two most prioritized practical action steps you can do, both of which I spend time training and having you do in the breakthrough experience. So the first thing you do is to actually sit down and make a list of what you do in a day, because you'd be surprised that most people are majoring in minors and minoring in majors, even though they're very adept. I've worked with consulting with high-end clients, very wealthy individuals running big companies, and some of them are still not performing at their peak because they're doing lower priority things and haven't fully delegated some things. They're still doing amazing, but compared to what they could be doing. So no matter where you are in the scale of socioeconomics, it's wise to make a list of everything you do in a day. That's the first step. And then take a look at what does it really produce in an hour economically, and then how much meaning does it really have? Because if you're not doing something that's extremely inspiring and meaningful, or if you're not doing something that's highly productive, that serves people, because you need both. You need to be able to do something that serves you and others, altruistically and narcissistically, or vice versa there. If they're not doing that, you're not going to have a sustainable gain. If you go and do something altruistically, but you don't get anything in return, you're going to end up boring yourself. And if you go and do something that's not fulfilling, doesn't serve anybody, you're also going to not go anywhere. You got to find a balance of serving yourself and others and having that in equilibrium. So that's why you first make a list of how much is it producing, which means you're actually doing something that people are valuing, they're paying for it. And the other is how much meaning it has to you. So you can't wait to do it. Make a list of those and then realize after that list, prioritize it. Which produces the most and has the most meaning, and prioritize it both individually that way and then collectively that way. If you do, you'll discover that, oh my God, I'm really spending a lot of my time, and then define how much time you spend on each of these things. You spend a lot of your time doing low priority stuff. And every time you do, you devalue yourself and devalue your creativity and productivity. So by going in there and doing that, that's the first step. And then slowly but surely, layer by layer, taking the lowest priority things and finding somebody to get that off your plate with. So you can do higher priority things to earn more money than the cost of the delegation. And it's a science. If you do it properly, you will grow, and you will just grow and escalate your achievements this way. And then you just do the next layer. And once that's delegated, you have a proper person in place. You may have to go through one or two people or three people or more to find that person that you can delegate it to. But once you do, it's off. And you go on to the next layer and take another layer of things that are lower in priority and off your plate until you're doing the things the most important. Your last and final delegation is duplication of yourself. And that happens either in a company or later in life. You want to duplicate and create a franchise or an exit strategy or whatever in your life. But if you're doing something you really love to do, you're inspired, you're working away through delegation. Now, until you can find that person to delegate, the next thing to do is to ask yourself this question. How specifically is the action I'm doing right now that's not quite my highest priority, but is still lower priorities that I feel trapped having to do? How specifically is doing this temporarily until I can get somebody to delegate it, helping me fulfill my highest value in the long run? If you can see it on the way and answer that 10, 20, 30 times, your brain will no longer be distressed by it, and you'll see that it's actually getting you what you want. It may be temporarily, you may be delegating it in the next 6 weeks, but in the meantime, you're seeing it on the way, not in the way. Those two actions by themselves can reduce the stress levels, I guarantee you, and makes you appreciate your life again. And it expedites because you're now seeing things on the way, not in the way. You're now master instead of victim. And you're not feeling like the outer world's running you. You change your perceptions or you change your actions. Changing your actions means delegating and lower priority things and getting on with higher priority things. Changing your perception means changing how you perceive whatever you're doing. So you do the change of perceptions until you can change the delegations. But I found that those two things I started doing in my late 20s had a huge impact on me growing my business and now getting to do what I do. But I basically research, write, travel, teach today. The rest of it's delegated off my plate. I jokingly say that I delegate everything else off the plate. I mean, I got a funny story. I had a gentleman that used to work in my office, and he and his wife were in there. And I had just flown in from Australia the night before, and they expected me to be in the office around 8 something. and I got in there early before 7 something. And I forgot to unlatch the door. So I came in there and I was in my back office. And all of a sudden they come in and I heard them talking. They didn't know I was in the back. And they said, well, the boss is coming in today. Get ready for delegations. A whirlwind's about to hit. Because whenever I got there, I unloaded a bunch of delegations. And they say, and he said, we do damn near everything except wipe his butt. And they were jokingly saying that. So I decided to put on a delegation sheet with a paper clip. I decided to put some toilet paper on there and said 11 o'clock, come wipe butt. And he had a good joke about it. We had a good laugh about it. But I'm a firm believer that if you're not delegating, you're holding yourself back in life. You can't expect to live an inspired life without delegation.
Yeah, yeah. So that first technique is really that case where you don't have somebody to delegate now is look at everything that's distressing you, and assuming it is an important thing and a priority, latch it onto the vision, latch it onto the values, latch it onto the things that are truly most important.
Link it to what you value most, and link it to how it's fulfilling your purpose, because it's something that is going to be done. And right now you're trapped doing it, but you don't have to be trapped by your perception. So change the perception so you can turn it from a got to have to do it into something you'd love to do it because it's helping you get what you want.
Yeah, I think sometimes when we talk about this, it seems so logical and easy, but I think a lot of new people listening are sort of going, I don't fully get it. But that's where breakthrough is so powerful, right? Because in breakthrough, you literally
people how to do it.
All the pieces and
work. I make them know it, so they got it for life. Once they know how to do it, they know what to do then.
Yeah, yeah, and they have a whole system around that as a whole. Just one question before we actually start talking about breakthrough, because I know a lot of people talk about anxiety. What's the relationship or difference between distress and anxiety?
That's a good question. I've sort of outlined distress. So let's talk about anxiety for a second, because it's kind of a hybrid of the stress response. Let's say that your mother and father were fighting, and you were a little 2-year-old boy, and you saw your mother and father fighting, and they really had it out. I mean, they got into a little battle, and they started hitting and slugging each other even. And you didn't want to see that and didn't want to hear it, so you crawled under the bed and covered up your ears and closed your eyes and curled up in a little fetal position because it was stressful to see it. You didn't know what to do, and you didn't want them to see it. And they fight it out, and you hear them in the other room, and you close off your ears and eyes, and then you fall asleep. And the next morning, mother and father, they're not fighting, and mom goes through the normal routine, and dad goes off to work, and then she gets you up and has you fed for breakfast, and then she takes you to the shopping mall. And as she goes to the shopping mall, you're sitting in a little basket in the front of the little cart, or on top of the cart. And all of a sudden she sees a guy that was dressed in blue jeans and a white shirt, just exactly like your father had the night before. And your father has brown hair and a brown mustache and blue jeans and white shirt the night he was fighting. And you associated that image with pain and hurt and fear. And so now if you see somebody in a mall with blue jeans, white shirt, and brown hair and brown mustache, you immediately don't trust the person. You're a little bit anxious, and there's something instinctively that protects you to not want to be around them. And so your mom is with you, and she sees the person. He says hi to her, but you get in front of your mom and either try to protect her or get behind your mom and try to pull her back. And she doesn't understand why you're reacting and acting out at that moment, but it's because of your association you made the night before of that event. Then you go past that person, you go around the corner, and you see another man who's now got a yellow shirt, blue jeans, brown hair, brown mustache. And now you have a milder response, but you still have a response because there's an association in the brain made with blue jeans and brown hair and brown mustache. Then you go down the next aisle and you meet a person that's got a white shirt, blue jeans, but now blonde hair, blonde mustache. And now you associate blonde hair. Well, as you go along, you're getting secondary and tertiary associations around an original event that you saw painful without pleasure, and you saw mean without nice, you might say. And your brain has these associations that's stored in the subconscious mind that are stacked up, that are associated with the original event. And you now, even though the original event's passed, now you're having a whole bunch of things triggering a response that brings up kind of a cortisol response, a stress response, distress response, associated with it. And you're not even aware of what it's originally from because you don't know how to peel the onion back or identify what the original event was. And you're walking around with hundreds of things after a while, triggering micro distress responses, all originating from anybody now that reminds you in any way it's got brown hair or brown mustache or white shirt or blue jeans or yellow shirt or blonde hair. 100 things now can trigger secondary and tertiary associations with the primary event. And unless you clear that primary event, or unless you peel back the onions layer by layer and clear those and balance those out, like we do in the breakthrough experience, you're likely to have an anxiety, and you'll go there and they'll put you on medication for it, psychiatric drugs, or they'll sit there and have you talk about what it feels like. But if they don't get to the original issue or don't peel it back and layer by layer and clear it and balance it, these things can run your life, and you can have these so-called anxiety disorders. But all they are is an original stress that's never been balanced. That's why I tell people to come to the breakthrough experience, so I can show you how to dissolve that, so you can do it at your own pace when you want, dissolving these things so they don't run your life. Because anything that you haven't been thankful for and loved runs your life until you do.
Yeah, that's actually profound. I think, and I think, you know, like actually saying that, because I mean, I'm coming to Breakthrough in Johannesburg when you're again on the 11th of August, just when I get back from the States, and you know, it's interesting because it's that subconscious level, and sometimes we do struggle to find. Like sometimes with through awareness, you know something is triggering it, but you can't kind of pinpoint it. But actually, during the process of doing Breakthrough, you can actually resolve that, right?
Well, what you do is, you know, the quality of your life is basically the questions you ask, and you can identify the questions and go through and peel back the onion, or you can go and ask the right questions to get right to the issue. I'll give an example. There's a lovely lady that had a father that was named Mike that drank and was so-called labeled the alcoholic. Now, if you drink and you have friends who drink, you don't call them an alcoholic if you both drink the same degree and you don't bother each other when you drink. But if somebody drinks more than you and does something that is, in your perception, painful while they drink, you tend to label them the alcoholic. But she had a father that she labeled the alcoholic because of the challenges she faced during that. And because she never really dissolved that, she had 4 in a row Mikes that were alcoholics, men in her life, that kept showing up to try to help her go back and clear the baggage. And I always say that everything is on the way, not in the way, if it's interpreted properly. So she kept thinking this is a distressful situation she keeps running into, but all it was trying to do is to teach her how to balance out perception and appreciate and understand her dad. And so, yes, we can have secondary and tertiary symptoms, and if we don't know how to ask the question of where that's coming from, we can be lost, and we can run our story and run our racket to some therapist all the time and thinking that's somehow going to solve it. But actually getting back to it and dissolving the original event by balancing an equation and seeing the hidden order in that moment, which is what I do in the breakthrough experience. I show them that whatever is perceived, the equal and opposite's there at the same moment. And there's nothing that we perceive as negative that doesn't have upsides. And because there's no event that's one-sided, you know, there's no such thing as a one-sided trait or event in life. There's just an experience that we've subjectively turned into one side or the other. And so I teach people how to balance out that equation so there's no subconscious baggage in the first place.
And I think that the powerful thing about Breakthrough is it's not in the room, you have it there and you can't have it afterwards. You literally teach the tools that you can then take and utilize in all these different aspects of your life going forward.
Yeah, well, I don't want umbilical cords plugging onto me. I don't want somebody who's a dependent. You know, I got a beautiful letter from a lady that was in India this morning. And she says, John, I'm here in India at a major yoga conference or whatever. And some of the teachings that you've shared, all these great yogis are preparing, saying, but most of them are promoting that you become addicted and dependent on the yogi. And it says, and there's something you said to me about 12 years ago that I remember asking you. And she said, will you be my guru? And I said, I'm not a guru. I'm just a man. I'm just a guy who's been researching. And there's no reason why you can't be the person that learns and does the same thing and pass the torch. But I have no interest in making you dependent on me because I haven't accomplished anything. And it's weighing me down having a bunch of dependents. I want autonomous individuals that are going out and doing extraordinary things with their life and giving themselves permission to shine, not dependents that keep needing me all the time. That's why I want to teach them the tools. I learned a long time ago, if I give them a fish, I feed them for a day, and I'll make them dependent. But if I teach them how to fish, they got fed for a lifetime. That's what I'm interested in.
Yeah. Well, let's actually, I mean, people are starting to ask, you know, how do we get to Breakthrough and what have you? So let me just interrupt your video slightly. And we've got a special package we've put together, which I think is really exciting. And I want to talk to you about that. But I'm actually going to let people know exactly what they can do and give them the links so they can start going and actually finding where the next breakthrough is closest to them. So let's just get back on. So John's just going to disappear into the corner. Don't worry, he's still there. You'll see him in the corner. Let's go straight. We've spoken a lot about what breakthrough is, so I don't think we need to really, go into the depths. We'll get maybe back to that a little bit later on. But if we go through this actual package, and John, before I even speak to you about this bonus you're given, the Inspired Destiny bonus, which I think is amazing, let me just explain to people what you can do now. Breakthrough is done throughout the world. So the link that I'm about to put up, and let me do that straight away so we can go. Oh, it's already up. It says remove offer. I'm assuming Gerard put it up already. The link that's up there that you can go to, not only will you get 10% off whatever the current discounted price is or whatever it is around the world. So whatever price you see when you go through and you actually book, because of the link that you use, it'll automatically process a 10% discount for you, which is only off the back of this webinar. But you will also get a free copy of the Inspired Destiny online course, which is worth $400. So that's an added value on top of that. But I think what's nice about it, because sometimes breakthrough's not next weekend, it might be in a couple of months' time, is you can actually use Inspired Destiny before you get to breakthrough, John. And I think that's why you sort of picked this course for people to work with.
Yes, I wanted people to start becoming familiar with the language so they get the most out of the breakthrough experience, and to start actually getting to apply some of the principles. Not all of them, but definitely some of the principles. Inspired Destiny it's exactly what the title is. It's about how to live an inspired pathway of your own destiny. I'm a believer that you're a prophet of your own destiny. You can decide what you want to create in life. Most people, they inject the values of other people, set goals that aren't really theirs, wonder why they're not happening, and then say stories and statements like, oh, you want to make God laugh, tell him your goals. And that's because they don't know how to set real goals. In the breakthrough experience, I show people how to set real goals. Inspired Destiny, I let them get to practice and start working on it so they can start to move in the direction of something that's congruent. And I'm absolutely certain a person can have an inspiring life. I have enough stories and enough thank yous and enough emails coming in on a regular basis of people who are doing it to know with certainty that this is doable. That's why I love doing it. And Inspired Destiny is going to help, but the breakthrough experience is going to give packed. It's hard to put in words what the breakthrough experience is about. It's 25 hours with me. We did an hour today, but it take 25 hours, and it's an intense exploration on how to master your life and how to live a life where you're not baggaged by all this distressful stuff, and you're clearing out the subconscious mind, and you're getting on with something that's meaningful, it's truly congruent. You deserve to have an inspired life. If you require motivation on the outside to do what you love to do, come to breakthrough. Because you don't need motivation if you're living congruently. Motivation is a symptom, never a solution for masters. And I want you to be able to do it. My life was changed by a gentleman that really cared about me when I was 17 years old. And I got the opportunity to spend, 3 weeks with this guy really intensely each morning. And I learned so much. And ever since that time I met him, the night I met him, I said, someday I want to find a young man I want to pass the torch to just like them. So I've been practicing literally 46 years to do that. In the breakthrough experience, I love watching people's, particularly young people's, when they get the advantage of learning these principles at a young age. When you're 60s, 70s, and 80s, it's amazing to see people have still resilience. But when you see somebody in their 16, 17, 18, and they're right there and they're ready to start their life and really get moving on it, that's extra special to me because of what happened to me at that age. So I love helping people do that. I want to help you because there's absolutely no reason why you have to sit there in desperation or have to sit there and being distracted or distressed over something that's not even necessary. You can change your perception. You can change your actions. Let me show you how to do that. It's worked for thousands of people. I know it will work for you. Just a matter of just teaching how to do it, letting you practice, and sending you and go fly off the cliff and go. When you have a child, you eventually want to see them stand on their own 2 feet. That's what I want for you. I want you to go out there and do something extraordinary with your life. So come to the breakthrough experience, get this Inspired Destiny program, take advantage of 46 years worth of experience, and don't reinvent the wheel and do trial and error.
Yeah. And I think what's lovely about this, and everyone should understand, people come to the breakthrough at a sort of highly advanced level, and people come to the breakthrough where they've actually got no idea what they're supposed to be doing with their life and they're feeling completely lost. It doesn't actually matter where you come in. You gain to progress tremendously from that perspective. So even if you're listening to Dr. Demartini and you're thinking to yourself, like, I don't know what my vision's on. I don't really know what I value. And I don't know, like, if I come there, how can I work with it if I don't know it? That's the whole point. You can come there blank, and you'll find it through that process as a whole.
Well, there's something in there. In the breakthrough experience, I have an exercise that is about owning the traits of the greats. So these are people, one of the great golf pros and golf caddies in the world. I mean, he's done with the very top golf people. We're there the other day in Ireland. An amazing guy named Jude. Okay, here's already a professional who's worked with the top golfers in the world at the biggest events. He went to another level. That's why he came to Breakthrough, so he could go to another level. I also had a young boy there, very young, who was basically saying, hey, I want to get clear about what I want to do. I had people that were all different ages in that group, but I don't see, there's nothing in there in that program that can't help somebody no matter what their background is. I'm just absolutely certain it can make a difference. There's a before breakthrough and there's an after breakthrough in life. And I asked people, how many of you, at the end of the program, I said, how many of you learned something this weekend that you could have gone your entire life and probably never have ever gotten to know about? Every hand goes up. So I'm absolutely certain there's original information there that can make a difference.
And I think what's really powerful is it's not, I mean, intellectually, you're amazing. It's like, you have such an incredible broad knowledge. So you learn an incredible amount of things, cognitively if you want to, but it's a physical experience. It's not just a whole lot of, talk. It's you literally go and do all these exercises and go through this whole process, hence the name's experience versus seminar or workshop. I mean, it's people have breakthroughs in the room. That's the whole point, right?
That's the end. There's nothing more inspiring to me than watching people open their heart, get clear, get inspired, and want to take action.
Yeah. I remember when I did it a number of years ago, and I remember like when we were going through the process of doing the breakthrough on Saturday night, and I was with a number of people, and we were all sort of talking about, we were feeling fatigue and we were feeling tired because we were battling through it and sort of unaware to us ourselves. When we got to that breakthrough, which was at a strange hour of the morning, I think, suddenly we were just filled with energy, and suddenly we didn't want to even go home. It's like such an awakening experience, and it's so unique for every individual in that room.
That's it. I've seen people who have issues with health all of a sudden transform their health. I've seen people that have relationship issues that are right on the edge and blink, ready to break up, all of a sudden learn how to communicate again and appreciate each other. I've also seen people in their business that are sitting plateaued and don't have clarity of vision, holding on to fantasies that they're subordinating to, or resentments that they have, or partnership issues, and they get them cleared, and all of a sudden they see past it, and they tend to go and catalyze their growth in their business. I've seen people in social issues where they're really resentful to people. we had somebody the other day that was really, really, really charged against Donald Trump, major time. At the end, he was actually humbled, because he identified, I tell people that whatever you resent in other people represents part of yourself that you're feeling ashamed of, that this person's reminding you of, and it's bringing it up. That's why you're having a resentment to them. And he was really humbled by that, because he goes, oh my God, I'm all the traits that I see in Donald. I said, yep. And all of a sudden he started to appreciate that in himself and even in Donald. And that was liberating, because he was preoccupied and almost spending an hour a day just dealing with distractions relating to that. And that was freed. So the breakthrough experience can do a whole bunch of things for you. And I can't even describe it all, because every day it's different to different people with different issues. But all I know is that if you want to master your life, it's a tool that will be for the rest of your life.
Yeah. Yeah, so just to reiterate again, as you can probably see on screen, right, there's an offer up there. It's valid for 2 hours from when we started it. It's a special exclusive webinar offer. So don't try and, ask for it later on. You can, if you click through, you will see a whole lot of countries. You'll see a whole lot of different cities that the breakthrough is going to take place in different parts of the world. You select the one that's closest to you in your country, if you're fortunate enough. You will, if you go through and purchase, you'll see the different pricing points. You go through and purchase, you get 10% off whatever the advertised price is. That's what everyone else is paying if they didn't come through the webinar. And then on top of that, you'll get this Inspired Destiny course, which you'll get immediately, so you can actually start to use that before you actually go and do the breakthrough experience as a whole. But I mean, I have never, and maybe people don't know me that well, but you know me, John, and I've worked with just about every kind of trainer and development specialist out there. But I've never come across something that in one occasion of like doing a 2-day event can have such an incredible, profound impact on such a diverse amount of issues and challenges and levels that people are in, all in one go. It is truly, truly an exceptional experience.
Well, I feel blessed by it. I've been working on the breakthrough experience literally 3 decades. I mean, I'm getting ready to come on the 30th year of doing it. I've done it 1,040 times in 62 countries, and tens of thousands of people have been through this program. And people go, well, how can you do something that many times, 42, 43 times a year for all these years? And I say, well, if you saw what I saw every weekend and the lives that are changed, I don't know of anything more magnificent than that. You know, when I ask people, how many of you know what it's like when they make a difference in somebody's life, would you agree that it's one of the most fulfilling things they can do in their life? Most people just think, yeah, that's it. When you make a difference, you feel like you're making a contribution to somebody else's life. That's meaningful to you. Well, that's why I do it. And people say, well, how do you do that? How do you travel as much? And how do you go in many hours and everything else like that? I said, come to the breakthrough experience. You'll know why. And I asked people even the other day in the program in Ireland, I said, how many of you, if you got to do what I just did this weekend and got to see what I saw every weekend, if you saw that every weekend or maybe even throughout the week, because I get to do it through the week, how many of you would be pretty inspired to do that? Most every hand went up in that room because they all had their hearts open. They had tears of gratitude. They saw clarity of vision. They broke through all kinds of stresses and distresses that they had in their life, and they saw things on the way now, and they were more freed. And that is very powerful. And to be able to do that as a living, and I help train facilitators that learn all the methods in the breakthrough, and they go out and they make businesses out of that. It's a whole career now. It's a whole industry now. And that is an inspiring thing. And I get letters from them daily now of the things that they're getting to do and making and passing the torch. So I feel pretty blessed. I get to watch people transform lives, and the breakthrough experience is where it all started.
Yeah, and I think, isn't that really where fulfillment comes from? It's living true to who you absolutely are, doing what you absolutely love, and witnessing how it influences other people around you through that process.
You said it perfectly. That's exactly it right there.
Yeah, which is why you do it so often, because you get to do that all the time.
Brian, that's why we do it. That's why we do what we do.
Well, I'm super excited. I must say, I've done a whole lot of I've done a whole lot of courses I've done before. I mean, I've been to Singapore and I've been traveling the world doing some of the courses I did a number of years ago with many well-known trainers. But when I suddenly decided I've got to come and do breakthrough again, I was so inspired. And now I'm like, geez, August, like I have to wait till the 11th of August, and I've got to go. I'm going to go and have some fun with my kids and everything in America first, so that'll distract me. But I come off the plane, and a few days later, I'm going to be in a room, and I can't wait, because it's always just a life-changing experience if you embrace it.
Well, thank you for that, Brian. But whoever's out there listening right now, thank you for coming on this line and coming on and listen to this webinar. My hope is that the information I've shared with you on distress and eustress and physiology and psychology, you can put that into your life. But I'm absolutely certain that if you make it to the breakthrough experience, I can actually make sure that you really get it inculcated into your life and put it into your daily thinking and actions. Because it's one thing to hear about it, talk about it, another thing to live it. And I'm interested in helping people live their lives inspired. There's absolutely no reason why you should have a motivational life when you can have an inspirational life. So thank you for that. And I look forward to seeing you at the breakthrough experience so I can make a difference in your life.
Thank you, John. We really appreciate it. And guys, once again, as you can see on the screen, there's an offer of 10% off the going rate wherever it is in the country. Just click on the link. You'll see where all the different places are. You get the free program, which you get immediately. Do yourself a favor if you know it's time to change something, anything in your life. Go to the breakthrough experience, and I promise you it'll be the best investment you've ever made to your own personal development and your future self that you've ever done as a whole. Thanks so much, everyone, for being here, and John, thanks for taking time out. I know we always sort of roping you in from wherever you are in the world, and it's wonderful to have you connect with the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people that come into these programs and these webinars.
Well, thank you, Brian, and I appreciate it. Thank you for helping me. And again, everybody, thank you for tuning in today. I look forward to seeing you soon, and I look forward to making the difference in your life as I've watched so many people's lives transformed by the breakthrough experience. So look forward to seeing you there, and thank you again for joining us. Thank you, Brian.
Excellent. All right, guys. We'll hopefully see you guys, or John will hopefully see you guys at those programs going forward. Thank you very much. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are. And we'll catch you later. Thank you very much.